Hi everybody. So today I want to review Dear Laura by Gemma Amor, which is another one of the novellas on the list of summer reading that I was working through a little bit. Gemma Amor is a UK-based author, illustrator, and podcaster. And Dear Laura was nominated for a Stoker Award in 2019. And she said she appreciates genre fluid, emotional, character driven horror, and her purpose in writing is to keep writing, keep learning, keep working on my craft until I have something that scares the pants off you. Now, Dear Laura didn't scare the pants off me, but I really enjoyed it because it was a very well constructed look at grief and anxiety and PTSD. It's the story of a woman who, she's now middle-aged, but every year for the last 30 years on her birthday, she's been reminded of the disappearance of her friend Bobby. So when she was the day before her 13th birthday, she and Bobby were good friends. They were hanging out and they were kind of sniffing around each other, they kissed. And she forgot something at home, left him at the bus stop, went back to get the things she forgot, and then went to go back to the bus, and there was Bobby talking to a guy in a van. And he got in the van, and she wasn't able to stop him, even though everything said, hey, don't, stranger danger, don't go there. And that was the last she ever saw of him. And Bobby sort of becomes the ghost. And she's completely devastated, obviously. And what's worse is that people seem to blame her for what happened. She blames herself, but at the same time, Bobby's mother says, why didn't you stop him? Okay, I'm sorry, but what is a 13-year-old girl supposed to do against that? So we go back and forth between when she was 13 and now that she's 44. She's walking through the woods. She's got a purpose. She's got a compass. And as the story unfolds, we find out that she's going to meet the person who abducted Bobby all those years ago. So on her 14th birthday, she gets a letter. Somebody's knocking on the door. She's home alone. And, the person just keeps knocking and knocking. And they put something through the mail slot. And it's, it's just a letter with spiky black writing and a yellow envelope. And it says that, the person who wrote the letter knows where Bobby is. And it asks her for a pair of her panties, and in return she gets a code, and it turns out that it's coordinates on a map. So she gets a job, she buys a compass, and she goes, but it's a wild goose chase because it ends up just being like a parking lot or a grocery store or something, and she almost sees the guy, but she's so overwhelmed with her anxiety and her disappointment and everything that she doesn't even look up. And then another year later, on her birthday, again, she gets another letter, and the same thing happens. He asks for something. When he gets it, he gives her some coordinates. And then this happens for 5 years in a row until finally she just gets tired of it, and she sends him back a note that says piss off, and she goes and gets her own apartment and a job, and she's thinking that's the end of it. She hasn't heard anything, seen anything. But then on her birthday, a rock comes in through her window, smashes her, she smashes up her mirror, and he's found her. And it also includes a picture of Bobby, and what happened to him is just terrible. So she tries to take it to the police, and she gets attacked, and the letters and everything get stolen again, and she just loses herself in her anxiety. She stops going to work. She stops, she just sort of gets overwhelmed with pills and weed, and she just, she can't face the world. And she ends up leaving her apartment and going and moving somewhere else in the middle of the night. Apartment on the 3rd floor, or like on the very top floor. Nobody can get to it. She's just got a tiny little window on the world. But so one day, she meets Frank, and they end up getting married, and she has a son, and it seems to have worked. Moving seems to have worked. Nothing happens for a long time, and she starts to breathe a little bit easier. But finally, 30 years pass, if 30 years from the first time she got the letter, and he contacts her again. Turns out that he was in jail, and now he's out, and it's time to finish this. So he's an old man, and each clue turns out was a coordinate, and this brings us back up to the present, and it takes her to his place in the woods. And she goes and she sees him there, and he taunts her, and he shows her, his chest where the people in jail carve pedo onto him. And she kind of loses it on him. And this, by the way, is the most satisfying part of the whole book. she just starts beating the crap out of him, and it's awesome. And then she turns around and she sees a grave, and she starts digging, and it says, it's a little cross. It says Bobby. She starts digging and she finds bones. But it turns out they're the bones of a deer, and it's just one more indignity. Like, it's just one more way to mock her. And he starts laughing at her from behind her. And she just turns around, and she's got a gun with her, and that was actually what she beat him with. And she shoots him in the face. And again, a very satisfying moment. But at the same time, there's going to be some fallout, because I guess even somebody so horrendous has rights. So anyway, I really enjoyed this one because I thought it was well paced considering the scope of it. And it really captured the anxiety and the grief and the survivor guilt that somebody would go through in a situation like this. And I thought it was a really, just an interesting situation, interesting look at what happens after somebody disappears. Like, I'm always interested in, we get a lot of stories about serial killers or people that, crime novels about people that die, or we get people that, we get the cops that are investigating, but we don't always get the stories about the people who are affected by it, and how that can just send out, how people, their lives are ruined by crime in ways that are unexpected. And it's a pretty quick read. Definitely recommend if you've got, a few hours and you want a nice little pace. It's well constructed. Laura's a very flawed character, but I think it's a really good portrayal of PTSD and anxiety, panic disorder. Anybody that's ever suffered from anxiety disorder can probably relate to a lot of what happens to poor Laura, and just how unfair it really is. After the death of a child, after a horrible crime, how nobody can figure out what happened, so they try to blame her for it. But I mean, what's a 13-year-old girl supposed to do, right? So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. I'll give it 4.5 out of 5 stars. The only thing, I don't know, maybe it was, the novella format is always a little bit of a complicated one, because, it's too much or it's not enough. And so this probably easily could have been a longer story. We could have seen more of her relationship with Frank. We probably could have seen more about her parents. But for the format that it was in, I think it worked pretty well. So anyway, Dear Laura by Gemma Amor. Hope you're reading lots of great horror. Have a great day.